This video is supported by Art in Scale and Plastic in Perspective admin. Very worthwhile checking out, very supportive community to share your work or ask for help on Facebook. Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Meconoman at YouTube with another model video. Today we're going to be looking at how to remove and reattach the nozzle of an airbrush and some maintenance you can do to that nozzle and in between all the way to the cup. This is a standard Patton Hyacinth 0.3mm airbrush. It is the same as many other Patton Chinese manufacturers at the output end, as well as other brands such as Iwata, Delta, Sparmax. The circuit is very easy as we have a funnel to add paint. A needle goes right through the opening to the nozzle, and around the crown an air source funnels or drags the paint out. This is what it looks like inside the crown. We have our nozzle, very small piece. The needle just extrudes out, screws into the airbrush, and we've got the gap here where the air travels outside. To get access to it, all we have to do is remove the crown and be careful not to move it around to disturb the needle and the nozzle. This is a brand spanking new, unused, perfectly maintained airbrush. We can see the brass bit is a part of the airbrush. This component is our nozzle and the needle. Now notice that a brand spanking new needle will stick out more than a mil. Over time the very tip will break off and will be slightly under a mil. But if there is enough debris behind the nozzle, it may retract in, not being able to extrude beyond the blockage. But if the needle sticks out far further than a mil, there is a fine tear or split in the nozzle and the spray pattern will be very splattery. This is a very old airbrush with a used needle and nozzle, and you can still see there is a fair amount of distance for the needle to stick out. When you buy a new needle and nozzle, the industry standard for a lot of our airbrushes is 0.3mm. It's ideal for a large variety of velocities of liquids from paints to inks. As this is industry standard across the tool, it's what's also forced on the modeling industry. It does not necessarily mean it's the most ideal size and tool for a lot of things that we do. The common distances are 0.2 for very fine work, fine inks, 0.3 and 0.5. I personally find the 0.5 to be the most useful for base coating, colouring in surfaces, and an intermediate amount of fine detail work, dusting or gradient effects. It's just wide enough that when you pull the trigger all the way back, which you would not be normally painting in that way, you can flush a massive amount of paint and thinner out during maintenance, including small debris, decay, parts, lint, particles, and build-up of paint pigment. Once you're getting into the really fine stuff, the 0.2, you're freehanding, but you normally thin the paint further. For a beginner, I would recommend after you buy your airbrush, Iwata, Hyacinth, Sparmax, whatever, also from the same source or online, eBay, Amazon, hobby shops, buy a 0.5, do a swap. We'll cover how to change a needle and nozzle in this video and practice that in your maintenance you use your painting. It will be far more easier, clogs less. For volatile paints like your clears, your polyurethanes that have an issue of clogging or causing problems, or primers that have a thicker pigment for body fill work or micro filling, a 0.5 will utilize and work far better for what you're doing without splattering, jamming your airbrush, blockages, and spending more time pulling apart, fault finding and cleaning than actually doing your artwork or painting your models. Some of the less known yet does appear in the industry is 0.7, 0.1, 0.35. They're far more expensive and attach to certain airbrushes of manufacturers and makes. You don't necessarily need to use them. They're not specially designed for anything in particular except for 0.1 for getting really fine hairlines. We will get into more expensive airbrushes once we master the cheaper Heising airbrush. Once you do buy your needles and nozzles, they'll come handy in these packs for storage and will remind you of their size, which is very important to have a corresponding nozzle to your needle as to not force them or split them. To pull them apart is very easy, and you can see that there is a little shroud on the needle which will be removed before installing. When you buy your airbrush, it will come with a wrench like this. It is very important for the removal of your nozzle. To remove your nozzle, it has to make sure that you are clear of all paint and fluids in the cup. Pulling the needle out will make everything drain through the back, absolutely ruining the internals of the trigger system as well as the air solenoid. A part that is always neglected is the needle nut. Make sure not to lose it. Actually keep all your parts in some sort of container so as they do have a habit of rolling off the table. And we remove our needle to be very careful not to bend or hook the very tip. If you do have a bend or any damage, you're able to hook it with a knife and shear it off, and then you're able to hone your needle against some very high grit sandpaper to regain the sharpness of the tip. There is a video on this. Don't be afraid to look at it and try it. To remove the nozzle now, we use the wrench, and it's just a quarter twist, and you're able to remove the rest with your finger very, very delicately. Do remember that the walls are brass. It's a very soft material and it is just a few microns. Very easy to shear the thread inside. Once removed, we're able to change to a different size, or if it's split and it's not performing very well, you change it to a new model. Now, while we have it open, we can do some basic maintenance. It's very common for debris to clog here and lessen your flow of air and paint. Right down the guts of it, we clean it with one of these bottle brushes. To return the nozzle, and be very careful with what you're corresponding with the nozzle sizes and the needle sizes. We're still on 0.3 mil. We sit it right on the thread so it bites, and we twist as much as we can. This part is very, very important. We add the wrench and just twist it around very gently until there's some resistance. Now, with the strength of only one finger, we slightly give a bit of pressure. If you use all your force and twist it tight, you shear it off, leaving the thread inside and the nozzle out. It'll take quite a bit of effort to get that thread out, but you've absolutely ruined a nozzle. There are plenty of videos, including on my channel, how to overcome that. Now, if this is our nozzle, and sometimes debris builds up, if you force your needle in there, not only you risk damaging the tip and breaking it off, you could pack the debris tight in the opening, making it very difficult for paint to spray out. Pack it tight enough, the debris will come out, splitting the fine walls of the metal or ruining the needle as well. If it's really tightly packed, it's very, very difficult to get anything out. That's where our next tool comes in, but generally flush it out, clean out the nozzle after every few sessions, clean out the distance between the nozzle and the cup every few sessions. But our nozzle repair tool is a spike. It's half a spike as such, and it actually has the distance to reach into a nozzle. You probably see that these come with some airbrushes on Amazon and eBay, and it looks something like this. Very fine, you can barely notice it. Here is a nozzle. They can clean a different variety of nozzles. Do not force it in. And you can see that it slightly sticks out of the hole. You're able to twist and just ream things out and make sure the very end of the hole is cleared out. Be very gentle, but it is an extremely useful tool. Once we are done and it's nice and tight in, we put our needle in. You do not force anything. If there's any resistance, you stop and you may have to reassemble the internals. And we push until we see the same distance of the needle sticking out of the nozzle. We can test with air and paint to make sure nothing is splattering out. Put our needle nuts back. Pull back on the needle to make sure the very tip is not exposed, and we put the end on. Just note that higher end airbrushes do have different systems in place for various different effects. This is an Ophir. There are similar patterns with other major brands, and it has a large bulbed nozzle that has an extremely thick wall. This is a Badger Sota, and it has a very, very fine nozzle. It is protected with a different head. Brushes with the cheaper parts, such as your Hysing, those needles and nozzles, are only a few dollars. The more interesting and different the airbrush, the higher the cost goes, into $20, $30, even $50. There is a lot of scaremongering in the community regarding airbrushes, their precision instruments. The word precision, I believe, is just a term used for people who are too scared or uneducated or experienced with a piece of equipment. Once you're familiar, it's normal and easily used like any other tool that you might use. You will ruin a few of these no matter what. It's a part of the journey of learning how to airbrush, and what better way than to do it to very, very cheap airbrushes. Hope this helps you, gives you the confidence to keep going. Experiment, pull apart, put back together very regularly to get an intimate feel for the internals and how it works, as well as use. Thank you very much for watching. As always, until next time, stay tuned for further content, and we'll catch you guys next time. Happy airbrushing.